Hello everyone and welcome to the Bearded Geeks, the weekly grab bag of topics covering movies, comics, video games and TV. My name is Jages, I'm the Beard Master and I'm sitting here today and we're going to talk about a horror film. I've just seen Hereditary, I've just come home, had a feed, sitting down, having a bit of a think about it, and so I thought I'd just sit down here in the Beard Cave for this week's show and I'm just gonna unpack this at the moment, what I've just seen and what I've been through, and I'll just unpack it to you guys, slap a bit of a review format on it, and give it a bit of a rating at the end. I will say, at the beginning of the show, right at the top, I will say, if you want to see this movie, Hereditary, if you want to see it, do not listen to this show. Do not listen to this show right now. I'm not going to go spoilers in the beginning. I'm going to do a spoiler section at the end, but I went into this movie pretty much not knowing anything and avoiding it. Well, I knew it a little bit. I knew about the movie. I saw the first trailer. I knew it was coming out. We were getting it. I wanted to go see it. But I was like, look, I'm not going to watch anything else. I'm not going to rewatch the trailers. I can't really remember too much of it. Just a couple of images and a few things that are going on. I'm not going to read any reviews, watch any reviews, anything like that. There's a lot of talk out there, kind of like at the festival circuit at the moment. It's like, put this in the categories with, like, The Exorcist and Psycho and Rosemary's Baby and, you know, all these bloody festival critics and that, always talking up, like, these art house horror films and stuff. And, you know, that kind of puts it up a little bit on a pedestal, so raises your expectations there a little bit. So, what I'll say to you is, if you have any interest in seeing this film whatsoever, don't listen to this show first. I am going to unpack it. I'll try not to spoil it at all, but I may just end up spoiling little things that may, you know, end up ruining it for you, even if you decide to skip the spoiler section. So, but yeah, then I'll go into spoilers and that later. So, anyway, that's your warning. Let's get into it. All right. Hereditary, starring Toni Collette, let's see, Gabriel Byrne, Alex Wolff. He was in, the most notable thing he was in that I recall was Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle. He was the kid at the beginning who became The Rock, you know, who had The Rock as his avatar and stuff. And in her first film, Millie Shapiro, who plays the daughter, the sister in the family. You've seen her on all the marketing and stuff. She's in the posters and that. She's this little girl. She's in all the trailers. They really give her that creepy kid appeal and quality in this film. So let's talk about my first impressions of the movie. So, like anything I discover, I heard about this, I think, what did I see? I saw the trailer on YouTube. At the time, it looked pretty good. I'm like, this looks kind of terrifying, like, pretty scary, like art house horror, you know, from A24, we'd expect no less. But yeah, like I said, don't really remember much from it, but I do remember a few of the images and stuff. Like there's an image of someone standing in like a living room and they're burning alive, like they're completely engulfed in flame. That was pretty much like the most striking image from that trailer that I remember. So as always, when I see a movie I'm interested in, I file away in the back of my brain. And obviously it's coming up. It's starting to come out in the US. It's gaining a bit of traction and stuff. People are talking about it. We're getting reviews, obviously, like I just said, being compared to Psycho, The Exorcist, you know, Rosemary's Baby, all these old school horror films that are, you know, genuinely terrifying in their own rights. So, again, it's up on a pedestal now. So you always get funny about, like, reviews and stuff from, especially of, like, horror films from, like, festivals and stuff. Us people down here in the real world, like, we're fans of horror. Like, we eat horror, you know. We watch the good stuff, we watch the art house stuff, and we even watch the bad stuff. Like I did yesterday, I watched the new Day of the Dead Bloodline on Netflix. Fuck, it was awful. It was an awful movie. But that's what we do as horror fans. Like, we'll watch it all. Good, bad, great, excellent, shithouse, we'll watch it all. So, we kind of get real funny when, you know, reviewers and commentators and people who whatever go to festivals and stuff and see these kinds of movies and then praise them so highly, because you always know that there's going to be a lot of people out there. So, you know, the general movie-going public, not necessarily horror fans, but the general movie-going public, you know, it's too slow, it's too arty, it's too this, it's too that, I didn't understand it. What did that mean? I don't get it. You know, those kinds of things. So we get funny we get nervous. So we get optimistically cautious, or cautiously optimistic. I always get that wrong. That's the second time on the show I've done this. Anyway, so I knew it was coming. And normally, where I live, obviously we live in a very kind of rural part of Australia, so we don't get a lot of the kind of smaller films or the smaller horror films or, you know, kind of offbeat stuff. Like, we didn't even get The Shape of Water, like, straight away. It was only after it started to get, like, really good critical reception leading up to the Oscars that it actually started to play, like, in our cinema. Even then, it was a limited release. It was not, like, once a day or twice a day, you know, for a week or something like that. It was bullshit. So, we don't really have a lot of access to that kind of stuff. Normally, me personally, I've always got my eye out for, like, home releases and stuff. The day it'll come out, I'll go out and buy one of these films and stuff. I'm a big fan of A24. I actually rewatched The Witch last week. I really enjoyed It Comes at Night last year. So, I like their stuff. I like what they do. I like what they put out. But it's getting, like, a mainstream kind of, like, chain release. Not as many screenings as anything else would, like a Star Wars or a Marvel movie or something popcorn related or a kid CG film. But, you know, we got it. So I knew it was coming. Today, it was out. I've gone. I've seen it. I paid my money. I sat there in a theater full of people. And it's crap going to see a horror movie with people because they just talk. They get all scared and they get all jittery and they're all talking amongst themselves. I'm so scared. Same thing happened with It, but it always happens. Like, people will sit there and they'll talk through these horror movies because they get all scared and jittery and it's fun to be scared and, like, just shut the fuck up. I paid to watch this movie. I don't want to listen to you talk. Shut up and be scared. So I went and saw it today. The story of the film is Toni Collette, Gabriel Byrne, Alex Wolff, and Millie Shapiro. They're a family. Toni Collette's mother has just passed away, and the movie starts with them kind of going to their funeral. And we find out kind of in the beginning, I'm going to kind of no spoilers here, but kind of lightish spoilers just to give you the base story. So we find out that, you know, Toni Collette and her mother, they kind of had a bit of a strange relationship. Her mother was always a bit weird and kooky and whatever, and later in her life, she had, like, a lot of health issues, a lot of mental illness issues, like dementia and stuff, and it became very difficult in her later life. She didn't know who she was, and then we find out that Toni Collette's, like, entire life is kind of, like, marred by tragedy. So the mother dies. She'd been living with them at the end. And then we start to notice, or Toni Collette starts to notice, strange things kind of in the house. Kind of just off-putting things and stuff. So she'll kind of notice, what's that over there in the shadow? Was that my mum? Is that really her? Stuff starts to move and that. It gets a little bit weird. You start to move into your kind of general horror movie thing. You're like, oh, she's dead. She's still in the house. Maybe. What's going on, you know? So it kind of eases into that general horror movie thing. But then things start to happen more frequently for Toni Collette's character, Annie. And then it starts to pass through onto the rest of the family. So mainly the children, Peter and Charlie. And then it kind of just degenerates from there and devolves, and we move into real horror movie territory. And yes, it is quite good. So that's pretty much the absolute base story. Not trying to give too much away, but that's absolutely the base story. So the characters, Annie, she's like a miniature artist. So she creates, like, miniature houses and scenarios and that. And she has, like, an art exhibition for her miniatures and stuff, like, 6 months down the track. And she works from home, so she's getting ready for that. Toni Collette really is, like, the center stage and kind of the linchpin for this film. Obviously, because it was her mother, and everything's kind of happening to her, really, because her life is so, like, touched by tragedy, you know, like, all of her family, like, all this bad stuff's happened, like, in her life growing up. She became distant with her mother, and, you know, just illness and all that sort of stuff, and it just got really hard. You know, it got really hard for her. So, now that her mother's died, she doesn't really know to grieve or not. She's like, should I be this sad? Should I be sadder than this? Like, and no one's really kind of grieving, like, for the mother and that, and no one kind of really has that outlet. So the family are kind of they're not brought together by grief. They're kind of just like, they've just returned home and kind of gone back to their normal routine with this kind of shadow of death lingering over them. Everyone's on fine form here. Pretty well understated as well, Gabriel Byrne. He is like the anchor of the family, so he's the one kind of holding it together for everyone. Although, like I do say, everyone is kind of distant in their own way from this film, but the one who comes off pretty much the most, the most stable is Gabriel Byrne's character, Stephen, the husband and father. Both kids, Peter and Charlie, both played really well by Alex Wolff and Millie Shapiro. Peter's kind of like this rebellious kid at school, like smoking weed. Obviously, you see him in school. There's a girl that sits in front of him. Obviously, he fancies her and stuff, and he's trying to get her attention and all this sort of stuff. And then there's Charlie, who's, like I said, the girl in the trailer, the girl in all the promotion stuff and that. She's kind of like this, like an odd little duck, you'd say. She's kind of like, doesn't really have any friends or anything, and she kind of gets around and does her own thing and creates her own crafts, and she got these little ticks and things and that she does. She's kind of just like her own unique little person. So she kind of just floats around and does her own thing. So they're really the main focus of this film, those four characters. There are some supporting characters in that come in and out of the film, but really it's these four people in this house and everything that happens afterwards. So let's talk about the performances. While I was watching this film, I probably got about halfway in, and it made me think of Get Out. Another horror film last year that was so successful and so different in its own right, but having your main lead nominated for a Best Actor Oscar in a horror film, no less. While I was watching this, I was just like, Toni Collette is absolutely killing it in this movie. Like, I could see her getting an Oscar nomination because of this, after everything with Get Out in that last year and everything that happened, with that film so critically and, financially. I could see it happening. I could see her maybe getting some form of award or recognition in that for this film. And she just does it. She's such a good actress. Like, it just seems so effortless for her. Like, she goes across the full spectrum of emotions in this film and totally 197.3% believable. Like, she is incredible in this movie. And not to shortchange the rest of the cast as well, the rest of the family, like, they're all fantastic. Especially Peter, Alex Wolff, like, in their own rights. Like, everything that happens in this movie, it's kind of like a family drama wrapped in a horror movie. And it is so good. There's this one scene, it's around about the midway, there's this dinner table scene, and I was just in awe, like, when I was watching it. Like, it kind of starts off slowly, like, somebody makes a little passing comment, and the other one picks up on it, like, do you have something to say? And then, boom, like, Toni Collette just, like, explodes in this scene. And Alex Wolff, in his own right, he carries it, like, he's going toe-to-toe with her. And they're just fantastic. In this film, literally, both those two, they're the absolute standouts of this film. Toni Collette, Alex Wolff, they're both fantastic. They are the absolute standout performances in this film. They're both fantastic. They are so good. Really, really good. But, there is a lot of tragedy in this movie. Obviously, her mother dies at the beginning. Toni Collette's character, Annie, has a lot of horrible back history, tragedy in her family, in her past. And then there are other things that happen kind of in the film that sort of, really put this family through their paces, like, emotionally. And, they're just, like, absolutely, like, driven to breaking point. And you can see that. You can see that transition of, like, this family starts off at the beginning, they're this unit, you see the four of them, you can tell they're a family. All families are different, all families have unique personalities in them, they all have, conflicting relationships and stuff, and, but at the end of the day, they are a family, and you can really see that, like, in this film. But just from where it starts, and then there's that bit of tragedy with a grandparent or mother-in-law passing at the beginning of the film, and then just as it just slowly makes its way through the film, and I do mean slowly, you see these actors just transition and this family just devolve, and it's just so engaging. Like, it is so engaging to watch, and it is so believable as well. Like, it is 110, what did I say, 197.3% believable. Like, it is really good. I dare say this is probably one of the best performed films of this year. Definitely some of the best performances of the year. Absolutely. Like, I can't state that enough. Like, if you go to see this movie, not only are you going to see a great horror film, but you're going to get, like, an acting tour de forces. Like, Toni Collette, oh my god. This is literally, this is probably the best thing she's ever done. Like, she goes from happiness to sadness to absolute tragedy to mourning to regret. You know, it's all there. Like, everything, it's all totally there. And you see the whole thing. And she is just so fantastic. Like, it would be worth going to the cinema just to see her performance alone. Like, if you have the chance to go see it, go bloody watch it, because it's great. Or, if you're at home on the big bloody telly, when you get it on home release, turn the lights off and watch it and just sit there in silence and just take it in. Because it's really probably one of the best performed films this year. And it really kind of hits you hard as well. Like, if you're a person, like, everyone in life, you know, we have family and we lose people and it's hard, and, you know, sometimes it's harder than others, and sometimes it's just, you know, crushingly difficult. Sometimes it's just incredibly difficult to deal with. Tragedy's not easy. And if you're a person that's experienced tragedy in some way with these characters, you will be able to relate. You will be able to. Because like I said, we've all lost someone. We've lost family members. We've lost grandparents, uncles, aunties, friends, you know, close family, immediate family members. You know, we've all been through it. And it's hard. And you can really, like, relate in a lot of way to these characters. Especially in the first half of the film. Before it really ramps up into the horror aspects. So there is a lot of relatability to be had there. Now, I want to bring up just one big pro in this film for me, and it is absolutely probably, it's the one thing that makes a movie great, but it is the thing that makes a horror movie outstanding when it's done well, and that is, double-hander here, the score and the sound design. The sound design in this movie is sublime. It is so good. It really adds in building that tension, like horrendously. Like, it horrendously adds to it. Like, it's just so well done. And I mean, this is from the get-go, from the absolute beginning of the film. The sound design kicks in, and it does not let up through the entire film. I mean, you're feeling tense from the very beginning, before the film even starts, before you see an image. You know, the opening credits are starting and you get the black screen and you just get that sound design kick in straight away, and you're just feeling, you're like, right, it's just really starting to ease into your chair to watch the movie, and you're like, okay, let's go, let's watch it. And yeah, that sound design is just fantastic from the absolute get-go, from the beginning, and it is so well done. I mean, what would the shower scene in Psycho be without, you know, those violins or whatever, you know, the re. It would just be like a stabbing scene, you know, there's no impact in that to it. Music is really what makes a scene. You know, it's really what makes a horror film scene. So sound design and score are absolutely crucial, and in this movie, it is so fantastically done. It's probably one of the best film scores I've heard in a while, and the sound design as well is really well done. Now, the composer on this film was Colin Stetson. Now, I haven't heard of this guy before, but I'll be definitely keeping an eye out from now on. When you think back and you think to, like, a lot of the most memorable film scores, obviously, in a horror film, Psycho is the one that really, like, jumps forward. And I think a lot of what people... The one thing... No, it wouldn't be a lot. It would be the one thing that people think of when they think of Psycho. So if somebody says to you Psycho, you immediately jump to the shower scene. But it's not the shower scene you think of first. It's the score. It's the... So it's always the score that comes first, and the picture of the shower scene that follows incredibly close after, but it's always the score. It's always that music. It's always that stabbing. That's the thing you always remember first. And Colin Stetson, like, in this movie, he takes the score and he just runs with it. Like, everything, every piece of music just adds to this so perfectly. And it's just so well crafted that, I mean, I'd love to see this guy get nominated for this. Like, in some way, shape, or form, or any kind of recognition for this score. Because it is really what makes this movie. Not only does it look great, is it shot well, but... you know, a movie like this is nothing without the score and the sound design. And hats off to this guy because he fucking nailed it. Like, hand in hand. Like, he just did it and he nailed it perfectly. Now, a couple of other pros that I've got written down here because I wrote them down so I don't forget them. The movie is a slow burn. You know, there are a lot of horror films out there, modern day horror films, you know, like slashers and shit and whatever we get now. You know, passes for a horror film. You know, straight up horror. It jumps to the easy stuff, you know. It's the jump scares. You know, it's the building tension of someone walking down a hallway and then the music stops. And then you're like, oh, wait for it, here we go. And then something jumps out and you get that big musical hit, that jump scare. You're like, oh, fuck. Scared the shit out of me. It actually happened to me this morning. I watched the trailer for The Nun. And yeah, that bit right at the end of the trailer actually got me where the nun's following her and then she stops and turns and comes out from the side. I was like, you fucking got me, you smart bastards. Didn't see that coming, but you got me. That was an effective jump scare. But what this movie realizes, and the writer-director, what's his name, Ari Aster, this is his first film. What he actually understands is it's tension that makes a horror film. It's building to it. It's not just like, build for a few seconds, cut the music, and then have a jump scare. It's always a slow build. And this movie is a slow burn, and it is a long film too. It's 127 minutes. It's probably the longest film from A24. These kind of art house films, I'm doing air quotes while I say this, art house films. No, art house horror films. Fuck, what's wrong with me? You know, it's probably the longest one. I think The Witch was like 90 minutes. It Comes at Night. It's probably around about the 95, 100-minute mark. That's not particularly long either. But this film, in being a slow burn, it really lets you get to know the characters. And you're pretty much like, it's like you're in a slow cooker yourself. You're kind of just cooking in your seat while you're watching this movie until you're absolutely done. Like, it really puts you through the paces. And it works. And it totally works in its favor. Now, as for cons, I do have cons here which kind of are spoilery, but I might just reel off the couple of non-spoilery cons, and then I might go into the spoiler section and do the rest. So, the runtime. I thought the runtime... I'm kind of on the fence about this one, because I don't know... Like, I've just seen it, I've just come to see it, I watched it, I sat there for the over 2 hours and watched it, and I can't decide whether the runtime was a help or a little bit of a hindrance, because like I said, these A24, these art house horror films, before they go probably the hour and a half up to 105 minute mark. So this movie was probably about 25 minutes to at least half hour longer than those films, and more so. But we really did get to know these characters and really kind of simmer in this family drama and that before, like, we really got to the end. Do I feel like it probably could have been a little bit shorter? Yes, I do think so. But then at the same time, that may have compromised the film. So I'm kind of on the fence about it. I'm kind of in two minds. Like, it is like an emotional tour de force to go through. But, you know, in the end, I think it's probably a plus that it was so long and it was quite a slow burn. Because I think in the end, you get these horror films and that are slow burns, like The Witch, for example. We'll go back to that because I watched that the other day. that movie is a slow burn, but sometimes there's not enough in there to keep you captivated. Because even if you get to the 90-minute mark, you might be like, this is going on too long for the amount of material that's here. Okay, kind of start to wrap it up. You know, you get to that point, getting toward the end of the film, you're like, okay, right, it's around about time you start to wrap it up. And then it may go on for another 10 or 20 minutes or something like that. But I think in the end, this film, I think it does work. And work in its favour. Because you really do get to sit in that emotional drama. And you really get to know these characters, and yeah, I think it works. Yeah, it works. It does work, actually, now that I think of it. See, that's what happens when we sit here and we unpack this together, guys. We work it out as we go. Alright, well, we might go into spoilers right now. I might just lay down some spoilers of the film, and just some things that I did like in regard to the spoilers, and there were some things that I actually didn't like. So, we're going to start the spoilers now in 3, 2, 1. So, Andy's mother dies at the beginning of the film, and then we have Charlie, who is the sister in that. We find out she has, like, nut allergies and stuff, and she's kind of a bit weird. She's cutting the heads off, like, dead birds and shit. And, you know, she's kind of curious, but in that kind of weird horror movie, curious, freaky kid kind of way. And then she gets killed about, half hour into the film? And that kind of knocked me for 6, because I'm like, I didn't see that coming, but obviously, this is important. So anyway, the movie kind of goes along, and then it kind of, you know, things start to ramp up, and the movie kind of shifts from kind of like a family drama, more of a psychological horror, into kind of like a supernatural horror. It kind of did the thing that Sinister did. Like, it kind of started as a kind of psychological-ish horror. Is this a serial killer movie? I can't really figure out what's going on. Oh no, wait, it's actually a supernatural horror. There's like a demon thing in it. When I saw that movie, that kind of knocked me for 6. I think it was due to the runtime of that, and I really didn't see it coming. But in this film, I think it works better in that regard, because it does spend a lot of time kind of unpacking that story, and it doesn't kind of devolve into a supernatural horror, and then it's a rush to the finish line. You know, we've got to wrap it up in the next 20, 25 minutes or whatever. So I think it really kind of works in its regard that it does spend more time, kind of like the first half being psychological horror and the second half being a supernatural horror. So yeah, definitely it does work in its favour then, because I feel if the movie was probably 20 minutes shorter and the supernatural section was kind of shorter, I don't think the movie probably would have been as well received as it has done critically. So, yeah, definitely works in its favour. And the movie goes, and then, you know, there's all this stuff about, you know, was Nana in actually, like, some satanic cult or something like that? There are all these, like, words scratched into the walls in the house. There are all these symbols, like, symbols on a jewelry, and the symbols on, like, a lamppost, and all this stuff, like, out in the middle of nowhere, and all this weird shit starts to happen. You see muddy footprints, people following people, lights, it's all this weird shit starts to happen, and then getting toward the end, we find out when Toni Collette's Annie goes through all her mother's things, she finds out that her mother was trying to conjure some King Paimon, or Paimons, or something like that, and he's going to possess a vulnerable male vessel, which turns out to be their son, Peter. So they're gunning for their son to possess him. And then we get to the end, and lots of weird shit happens in the last 20 minutes. Like, I can fucking tell you, like, Toni Collette really fucking turns it up to 11 with the whole horror movie stuff. She's floating, she's hanging off walls and shit, and then she saws off her own head. It's pretty crazy. And then Peter ends up getting possessed at the end by this spirit. They're all like these nude cultist people worshipping him and stuff. And then they crown him as their king. Now, the problem I had was, I will say this, guys, like, right at the start of the movie, at the funeral, there was this scene where Charlie, the daughter, goes to look in her grandmother's coffin, and she looks, and then she kind of looks to her right, so into the background of the image, and she sees this blonde-headed dude, and he looks at her, and he smiles at her, and it's kind of this weird, freaky smile. And when I saw that, I'm like, that guy's gonna be important later. And then I kind of forgot about him, and then he turns up at the end of the movie as one of these nude cultist people. And I'm like, I do remember that now. I forgot all about it, but now he's at the end. He's a nude, cultist, dick-swinging dude running around people's houses and out in their backyards and stuff. So it's kind of fucked up. But I felt in this movie, you know, touching on or using horror tropes in that and subverting them. People who review films really like to say that it subverts so many different horror genres at the same time. I'm just like, it's a weird way to put things. Like, it's kind of a lazy thing to, like, for a horror movie to do something different instead of saying it subverts the genre. You're like, yeah, man, that's kind of like a tired phrase or a saying or whatever in that. I don't like it. It does, for the point of argument, I will do air quotes again just to use it to frame it easily. It does subvert the genre, but also, it's kind of lazy with the genre as well. Like, this guy smiling, like, I spotted him a mile away. Like, that guy's going to be important later. I was noticing symbols and shit, like, right from the beginning. I'm like, that's an odd-looking symbol. The camera's leering on that a bit, you know, it's kind of lingering on that symbol for a bit. And then all this other stuff which kind of kept popping up, and then there was this woman who popped up, and she was talking to Annie at, like, this counseling meeting, and I'm like, she's not actually going to be, like, a counsel person, she's going to be, like, a cultist person or something like that. And sure enough, later on, she goes around to her house, and she sees the doormat, and she's like, oh, my mother used to make doormats just like that. And I'm like, because your mother made it. And this woman's like, oh, really? Isn't that nice? Isn't that interesting? But yeah, it's like all these, like, I could see stuff coming a mile away. Not that I put it together, but I'm like, I noticed, like, all these different horror tropes and stuff. Like, I've seen enough horror movies, like, I could pick it apart. I didn't get, like, the full ending and stuff, because it kind of plays with you, because there's a lot of mental illness in Annie's family, so you don't actually know whether they're gonna do the same old tired trope where, is this a real horror? Like, are there actual supernatural horror things happening, or is it just the main character whose mother died, she has psychological issues, you know, and she's actually in a nut house or something like that, and all her family and that are trying to help her. Her husband's actually the doctor or something like that. But it kind of plays on that, but then turns a big middle finger to you, because you think it's going to go that way. You're like, nah, you know, there's a pretty good chance that she's going to have mental issues. Oh no, wait, it actually is a supernatural thing. So at the end, Peter is possessed by this King Paimon, and then we find out in a twist that Charlie, the daughter who died, was actually the imperfect female vessel for this demon king or whatever. But he prefers male vessels, so they had to kill her off and then move him into the brother's vessel and stuff. Now, the problem I have with this movie is that these art house films, they kind of like lay down the groundwork, but they kind of leave it to your imagination, like a lot of stuff. They hint at a lot of things or give you a lot of information and then don't tell you at the end. So, you know, they leave it to you to work it out. And I really appreciate that, like, a lot in my art house horror. Like The Witch, It Comes at Night. Obviously, those two films, big from A24. Those two movies really kind of played on that as well. Like, we're going to give you enough information, but we're not going to just straight up tell you what's going on or what's actually happened. We're just going to leave it for you to figure out yourself. And that'll sit with you a bit longer. That'll make you think about it when you leave the cinema. The problem I have with this movie is, and I'm not sure if this is because it's from a first-time director, or, you know, they're worried that the audience wouldn't work it out, is that right at the end, like, we have this lingering shot of Peter, who's now possessed, with a crown on his head, and everybody's worshipping him and stuff, and this music's playing in the background, the score is playing, and it's fantastic, and then it's, like, lingering on him, and you're like, the camera's gonna cut here any second and go to black, and the credits are gonna roll, and I'm gonna walk away, and I'm gonna think about this and dissect it myself, and then, all of a sudden, when you think the camera's about to cut, the friend, the Joni who befriended his mother, jumps in and lays down this bloody 30 seconds of exposition that explains everything, what he actually is, the twist about Charlie being the imperfect female vessel, and you're now King Paimon, one of the 7 kings of hell or something like that. Lay us down with your wisdom and all this shit. We worship you. We're all this stuff. And I was just like, really? This is too much. Like, I've pretty much worked it out. Like, I would have had more fun going away dissecting this myself. And I think this is probably the biggest hindrance of this film, is that this movie didn't cut 25, 30 seconds ago. It actually explained all this stuff. Now, I don't know if it's because of maybe their last couple of horror films, A24, The Witch, and It Comes at Night. People said, it's too arthousey. I don't get it. I don't get what's going on. So maybe they were a bit worried. And maybe they actually said to the director, look, at the end, can you just tack on a few sentences that actually explains what's going on? It really feels out of place. And it just, like, if you cut that there, I think this film probably would have been even more, like, critically well received. You know, they're like, oh, we would have ranked it higher, but, you know, the ending, you know, they kind of spelled it out for us, which was totally unnecessary and kind of took away from the film. Like, you had such a good run, like, why did you do that? But yeah, that's probably my biggest hindrance of the film, is that last 20 seconds when they spelled it out for me. I didn't need it to be spelled out. I pretty much worked it out on my own. I understand that you wanted to deliver that final twist, but, you know, I didn't need all that extra stuff. Like, it's nice of you to do it and to try it, and I hope it works well in your favor in the long run, but, you know, for me personally, it was unnecessary. Like, it didn't need to happen. But I can see, you know, why they would have put it in there. You know, some of the reasons that may have been that they did put it in there. You know, whether to make it easier for mainstream audiences, you know, because of what's happened their last couple of films. I know It Comes at Night especially was like, the trailers don't sell it as well. Like, the trailer looks like one thing, but then you go and watch it and it's really, like, hard, art-housey horror. Saying that a lot tonight, art house horror. Well, it's what it is. It's kind of that genre, isn't it? But yeah, that's probably my biggest peeve of the film. Now, one other thing I do want to say, this was kind of just like a minor niggling thing, but I've watched too much movies in my life, and I don't know. I take too much stuff in, and I notice stuff a lot easier than a lot of other people will. But there are 2 scenes in this movie where characters were delivering dialogue, and I understand ADR's needed. Like, we didn't get that line fully, we didn't hear it. Can you come back into the studio and re-record those lines, and we'll just put it over the top, so it comes through nice and clear. There's 2 times in this movie where characters are laying out dialogue, and later on in ADR, they've changed a word. So there's a sentence that someone says in the film that says, you've got to make... Like, when I was watching it, like, I was reading her lips, and it was like, you've got to make sure that everyone's in the room at the same time. She says, everyone's in the room. But the dialogue is, you got to make sure everyone's in the house at the same time. And when I saw room on the lips and house in my ears, those 2 things didn't match up, and it just jumped straight out to me. And I was just like, oh man, you could have done better than that. You couldn't have done another take or whatever. Or maybe, like, it was a first-time director, he just noticed later on. He's like, you know, that line doesn't actually work for later on. We should change that from room to house. Let's just re-record it. Let's redo it. It was just one thing that I really noticed. And there's another scene later on where Toni Collette's delivering some dialogue, and she's kind of front and center in the screen, and they changed her line in that as well, and it doesn't match up. There are 2 times that happens. But that was just me. That was just one little tiny niggling thing that got me. Anyway, I think that might do for spoilers, so we'll just cut it there. End of spoilers. Now, there was one other thing I forgot to say before we went into the spoiler section. I'll just bring it up now. The camera work in this film is really well done. Like, the way the house is designed in this movie, there are lots of long corridors and lots of big open spaces. And what's his name? Ari Aster. He does a lot of far shots. So he'll set up the camera on one side of the room, pretty much like where the wall should be. And you have characters coming in and just delivering like a big scene of dialogue, like coming down some stairs from the background and playing out this scene, and then the camera will just track along and follow them if they move to the other side of the room. Now, there's a lot of that in this movie. There's a lot of, like, far shots and stuff. He really uses that quite a bit. And I think it's very effective in that, because I feel like in horror films and stuff, if you have too much cutting, it kind of takes you out of it. But if you really want, again, that word, arthouse horror film, if you want it to be a slow burn, if you want to build tension, if you want, your score and your performances and the look of the film and the camera work to all tie up, what better way to do it than then in one big far shot and just slowly track characters as they walk through the house. Not saying that's used all through the film, like constantly. That's the only thing we get. We do get a lot of back and forth with people and dialogue scenes and stuff and that, but it's very kind of minimal on the cutting. And there are a lot of like transitional fades as well. Like one scene will begin to fade out and the other one will begin to fade in over the top. So you get those slow kind of fade in and fade outs kind of over the top of each other. Works out really well, like in this film's favor. Now, to wrap it up, I guess if I was going to put my final thoughts down on it, I would definitely say try not to find out too much about this movie. Like, if you just hear about it in passing, just go and watch it. Don't watch reviews, don't read anything, don't spoilers or anything or whatever, because guaranteed someone will spoil one tiny little thing for you. If you have the opportunity to go and see this movie without knowing anything about it, fucking do it. Because you'll be all the better for it, and you'll enjoy it more. Just go for the ride. Just go for the film. And like we used to years and years ago, before the internet, before social media, before phones. Just do that. Performances are absolutely stellar. There's this amazingly acted family drama in this horror film. It's tragic, and it's beautiful, and it's scary, and it's depressing, and it's kind of painful to watch as well. But it's really well done. Like, everyone's on fine form in this movie. It is scary. A lot of people are saying that, like I said, it is, put it in the same category as The Exorcist and Psycho and all these other movies and that. Yeah, I don't think so. It is a really well done film, but, I don't think it'll ever be timeless like those films are. They're saying it's the scariest movie of this year. I probably would agree, it's definitely the something movie of this year, but I found it to be more unsettling than scary. There were a couple of bits where I was like, oh, this is a bit, kind of getting toward the end and stuff, but I didn't really find it scary. I found it more unsettling and unnerving than anything. So it is definitely, you can put this on the poster from Jages of the Bearded Geeks Podcast, the most unsettling movie of the year. A lot of people are also saying that it's a movie that'll get under your skin. It probably will, but for me personally, not really. I don't really feel like it got under my skin too much. I've seen other more unsettling and unnerving horror films that really kind of got under my skin for another day or two. I don't find myself... I imagined I probably would have been... before I went and saw this, like, it's going to get under my skin, and I'm going to think about it, because I've seen a few, like, folks I follow on Instagram saw it, and they're like, this is going to sit with me for a few days after this. This is really kind of the first time that I've seen, like, one of these horror films, and I don't really feel like it got under my skin too much. I enjoyed it. It was really well done. It was really well put together. There were a couple of things about it that I didn't like, or probably weren't done as well as could have been. Chalk that up to maybe an inexperienced director or a studio, like some studio mandates or a few things like that. But, there were just one or two tiny things, and that was just me personally. But I think a lot of people are going to enjoy this movie, and I definitely feel that a lot of people won't enjoy this movie because they probably won't get it. But, it comes with the territory. If I had to mark it, give it a mark out of 5... probably give it a 4. I'd give it a 4. Because everything else that the kind of the problems I had with it would easily fit, under the 1 point category. So I would probably give it a 4 out of 5, definitely. Don't feel like you're going to go in and see the scariest movie you've ever seen, because you probably won't. But I guarantee you'll probably be unsettled and a little bit creeped out by it, and pretty unnerved, and pretty in awe of some really, really great performances. Alright, that's going to do it from us here in the Beard Cave this week. If you want to find us online, you can go to Facebook, facebook.com/BeardedGeeksPod. If you want to listen to the show, you can jump on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube to listen to and download the show from a few of those places. If you want to buy a t-shirt, you can go to tpublic.com. And if you want to find us on Twitter and Instagram, we are at both of those places. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in and listening to me just, like, unpack this movie and just kind of, like, just go through it with you guys. And, yeah, it's been good. I appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and to ring the bell for notifications. And we'll see you all next week on the Bearded Geeks. Hey!